On Christmas Eve, I found myself standing in my parents' living room, staring at the family portrait hanging above the fireplace. It was a large, glossy photo, beautifully framed, but something about it was off. My face had been completely cut out. The realization hit me hard, though I didn't let it show. The next day, nobody mentioned it. We all went about our business like everything was normal, like there wasn't this glaring omission staring us in the face. I had brought an envelope with me, and when the moment felt right, I quietly handed it to my parents and told them not to open it immediately. Naturally, they ignored my request. My mom's reaction was immediate. She burst into tears, and I watched as my dad's face went pale. I wish I could say I was surprised by their reactions, but in truth, I wasn't. It was as if this moment had been building for a long time, like it was always meant to happen. There was a sense of inevitability about it, a feeling that I couldn't shake. As I stood there, I thought back to the way the snow had clung to my boots when I first arrived, how I had stomped them off before stepping inside. I remembered looking up and seeing that photograph, positioned with such care and pride, like it was the centerpiece of our family story. Everyone was there, my mom, as cheerful as ever in her red blazer, smiling like she hadn't spent years sighing at anything that wasn't related to my sister. My dad wore that stiff, formal smile he always had in posed photos, the same one he'd use for selfies on the golf course. And there was my sister, of course, at the forefront in her expensive beige turtleneck, looking effortlessly composed and likable. But I was nowhere to be found, not even awkwardly tucked into a corner or blurred in the background. It was as if I'd been meticulously erased from their story, without a single trace left behind. I only stared at it for a few seconds, just long enough for my stomach to twist, but not long enough for anyone to notice. Or maybe they did notice, and just didn't care. "Dinner's almost ready," my mom called out from the kitchen, her voice light and casual, as if we were the perfect family. The sense of rosemary and lemon wafted through the air, festive and nostalgic, bringing back memories of when those smells meant something warm and comforting. I hung up my coat by the door, muttering a quick hello, and made my way into the kitchen. My sister was already there, swirling wine in her glass like she was hosting some kind of holiday special. She leaned in for one of her air kisses, just close enough for the gesture to count, but distant enough to avoid any real contact. "You made it," she said, like I was late to her carefully planned event, as if this was her home. I didn't bother responding, just gave her a smile, the kind you give after you've screamed into your pillow multiple times in a month and decided your voice wasn't worth it anymore. Dinner unfolded like a scene straight out of a script. My dad sliced the roast with exaggerated care, as if he was auditioning for a part in a holiday commercial. My mom praised my sister's glowing skin not once, but twice. No one seemed interested in how I was doing. No questions about where I lived or what I was up to. The only inquiry directed my way was whether I still had that little car, which was code for "we have no idea what's going on in your life, and we're hoping you'll fill us in so we can pretend to be interested." I didn't take the bait. Instead, I watched my sister open a small, neatly wrapped gift from my parents, a vintage gold watch. "Nothing extravagant," my mom insisted, which would have been amusing if I hadn't seen the folded receipt tucked beneath the tissue paper. I knew how much it cost. I'd have to work a week and a half to afford it, assuming I skipped groceries. My sister, of course, was beaming. "Oh my God, you guys," she exclaimed. "This is just wow." My dad grinned proudly, like he'd just closed a big business deal. Meanwhile, I got a mug that said, "Somebody's favorite daughter," which I'm sure was meant to be ironic. At least I hoped it was. After dessert, I excused myself, claiming I was tired. My mom offered me the guest room. Not my room, not my old room, just the guest room. The sheets were basic, the bookshelf was dusty, and the single lamp flickered if you breathed too close to it. I shut the door behind me, turned on the lamp, which flickered as expected, and sat on the edge of the bed. That's when I pulled out the envelope. It had been sitting in my bag the whole time, thick and heavy with the weight of what it contained. I knew this moment was coming, had known it for a long time. Yet, sitting there alone, I couldn't help but feel the sting of being erased from my own family's narrative. I remember holding that envelope, feeling its weight in my hands, and thinking about how everything had led up to this moment. The plan was to give it to them the next morning, after the stockings, after the cinnamon rolls, after the little performance we all put on. But standing there in the living room, looking at that family photo on the wall, it was like I was staring at proof of my own erasure. My entire existence carefully airbrushed out, like I was a glitch in the family algorithm that needed to be removed. It wasn't just forgetting, it was deliberate, like they decided I was a bad brand that needed to be cut from the lineup. As I turned the envelope over in my hands, it felt heavier with everything it represented. That night I lay in bed and let the familiar creaks and groans of the house settle around me. The same old floorboards, the same ticking clock on the wall. Somewhere down the hall I could hear my dad snoring. My mom's voice drifted up once, something about bringing out the good plates tomorrow. My sister's practiced, breathy laughter followed, the soundtrack of The Golden Child. I closed my eyes and thought back over the years, to the time I got into my dream college. They said they were proud, but then immediately asked if I could defer a year to help my sister with her portfolio. Or the time I missed rent and called home. And Dad said things were tight, even as they planned a cruise for her birthday. And the time I brought home a boyfriend, they couldn't even remember the name of at dinner. He never came back, and I couldn't blame him. I was tired of convincing myself I was just being sensitive, tired of pretending I misunderstood the situation. Lying there in a bed that was supposed to feel familiar but didn't, I decided I would stop making excuses. Tomorrow I'd give them the envelope. No yelling, no crying, no raising my voice. Just a smile, a Merry Christmas, and let the truth do what years of silence never could. I woke up to the smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls and the faint sound of my sister's voice talking about luggage weight limits and how stressful travel is. The irony, of course, was that she wasn't paying for any of it. Not the travel, not the luggage, not even the suitcase or the shoes inside that cost more than my monthly rent. But sure, devastating stuff. Cue the sigh and pout. I stayed in the guest room a little longer than necessary. Not because I was still tired, but because I wasn't in the mood to walk back into the sitcom set that was my family's idea of Christmas. I could already predict the fake laughter, the overcooked optimism, and someone, probably my mom, saying something like, "Isn't it nice having everyone together?" As if everyone meant me too. As if I hadn't spent the last decade as the human equivalent of a blurry background character in every family memory. Eventually, I wandered into the kitchen. My mother was plating scrambled eggs like she was auditioning for a brunch spread in a lifestyle magazine. My dad was at the table scrolling through his phone. My sister was barefoot, sipping almond milk from a wine glass. "Good morning," my mom said, not looking up. "Hope you slept okay in the guest room." "The mattress has a personality," I replied, pouring myself some coffee. She laughed like I was joking. We made it through breakfast the way we always did, performing. There was no catching up. No one asked about my job or how I was doing or whether I was still living in that small apartment with the creaky stairs, which I wasn't. My sister talked about her upcoming trip to Barcelona and how lucky she was to have parents who supported her dreams. I didn't say anything, just nodded along like a seat filler at an award show. They still hadn't noticed the envelope sitting in my coat pocket. That would come later. Instead, my thoughts drifted backward to everything that led up to this moment. When I graduated high school, I got a scholarship. Not a full ride, but enough to make it possible if I picked up part-time work. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, paperwork spread out, asking if they could help with the rest, just a little. My mom gave me this look like I'd asked to borrow her wedding ring to pawn. Dad said something about tough timing and how they were still catching up from the bathroom remodel. You know, the same remodel that included heated floors and a bathtub with Bluetooth. 2 months later, my sister got a new car for her 18th birthday. White leather seats, custom stereo, a bow on top. She cried when they handed her the keys. They were everything to me once, the kind of parents you think are the best in the world. I remember standing there by the recycling bin with a graduation card in my hand. It had a $20 bill tucked inside and the words, "You're going places," written across it. And I believed it. So I packed up and went to college, juggling 3 jobs, barely sleeping, living off instant ramen. I graduated with honors, moved to a new city, and started my life all over again. After that, I never asked them for anything. They never offered either, not even when I lost my job 2 years ago. When I got sick and couldn't afford my medication, I didn't call them. When my apartment flooded and I lost almost everything, I didn't reach out. I just bought a secondhand mattress and made do. Meanwhile, my sister's Instagram was filled with her sponsored trips to Santorini. I used to wonder if it was something about me, if I was just harder to love, too reserved, not as bright. Maybe I should have joined a sorority, smiled more, blended in better. Perhaps if I'd played piano instead of working late shifts at a diner, they might have noticed me. Maybe if I hadn't been so independent, always seemingly okay, they would have realized I needed help too. But then I remembered my 8th birthday. I had invited a few kids over and baked cupcakes myself. Mom forgot to pick up the pizza, so we ended up eating cheese slices on saltines. My sister had a dance recital the next day, so my party ended early. They promised to make it up to me the next year, but they never did, or the time I won a state science competition. The school called home to share the news, and I got a text back saying, "Nice job," with a smiley face. That was it. No celebration, no framed certificate, nothing. But when my sister got a minor role in a shampoo commercial, they threw her a party with balloons and a cake that said, "Future Star." So no, it wasn't me. It was never me. Earlier this year, everything shifted. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I went to the local records office for something routine, just a proof of address for a job application, bureaucratic stuff. But then I saw a document with my name linked to a property I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe just someone with the same name. But I was curious. I started digging, making small requests, searching online, sending a few carefully worded emails. The more I found, the more tangled it all became. There were things I'd never been told, secrets that had been deliberately hidden, and at the center of it all was me. I didn't react immediately. I didn't confront anyone. I just watched, like I had my entire life. But this time, I wasn't powerless. I had evidence, paperwork, records, proof. The deeper I went, the more I felt a strange sense of calm. It was like I'd been living underwater without realizing it, and now I could finally breathe. They hadn't just forgotten me, they'd used me. Used my name, my rights, and most of all, my silence. But not anymore. Now I had something they couldn't ignore. That morning, after breakfast, I took my time getting dressed, let them go through their usual holiday routine. When I finally came back downstairs, they were already halfway through exchanging gifts. My sister was opening something extravagant, pretending to be surprised in that way she does. Mom had that teary-eyed look she always gets at moments she can later post about online. Dad glanced at me and asked if I got any sleep. I just smiled and said, "Enough." He nodded and turned back to watch my sister fawn over a designer handbag. I sat down quietly and slipped an envelope from my coat pocket onto the table, nestled it between the coffee mugs and the torn wrapping paper. No one noticed. Not yet, but they would. They always did. Just a little too late. It took about 10 minutes for my mom to spot it, or rather, she noticed something unaccounted for on her precious reclaimed wood table. Heaven forbid anything be there without a coaster or a clear purpose. She picked it up cautiously. I'm sitting here trying to find the right words, but they don't come easy. It's like a mess of emotions, all tangled up, and I'm just trying to make sense of it. I guess it all started when I handed them that envelope. I remember that moment so clearly, like it was yesterday. It was Christmas, and the room was filled with the usual warmth and laughter. My dad was poking around, probably hoping to find another gift under the tree. And my mom, she had this puzzled look on her face when she held the envelope, almost like she thought it was a mistake. I just sat there, taking a sip of my coffee, and said, "It's for me." I could see the surprise on their faces. My dad, with his usual smile, told me I didn't need to get them anything, but I wanted to. That's when things started to change. My mom sat down, turning the envelope over in her hands, asking if they should open it now. I shrugged, saying I'd prefer they didn't, but they did anyway. Of course they did. Dad leaned in as she opened it, and for a few moments there was just the sound of paper sliding and crinkling. I watched my sister fuss over her new designer tote like it was something precious. Then everything shifted. The silence became something else, something heavier. I didn't need to look up to feel it. It was like this realization, this sinking feeling, like when you find out the milk in your coffee has gone sour. I heard my dad let out a breath, and my mom, she was reading faster now, flipping through the pages like she could somehow escape what was there. My sister was trying to figure out what was happening, asking what it was, but they didn't answer. That's when I knew it was time to speak. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the moment, and wished them a Merry Christmas. My mom finally spoke, her voice quiet and flat, asking what it all was. I told her it was a copy of Grandpa's will. She blinked, confused, saying she'd seen the will, that they'd handled the estate. But they hadn't shown me everything. They'd told me there were just a few keepsakes and some cash for funeral expenses. But that wasn't the whole truth. The will mentioned a rental property in Old Briar, something they never told me about. They'd been collecting rent from it, and my dad dropped the papers like they burned him. He asked where I got it from, and I told him, listing off public records and title searches, tax filings, and a very patient lawyer. My sister finally stood up, asking about the rental property. I told her it was the one she used for a photo shoot last year. She was at a loss for words. My mom tried to explain, saying it wasn't what it looked like, but I smiled, because it looked exactly like they'd used my name and my inheritance to fund their lifestyle while telling me there was nothing left. She said it wasn't like that it was complicated. But it wasn't complicated. The will was clear. The house was left to me, sole beneficiary, full title. That meant all that rent they'd been collecting was technically stolen and the renovations unauthorized. My dad rubbed his temples like this conversation was physically paining him. I hoped it was. He muttered something about me being dramatic, and that made me laugh. Right, I'm the dramatic one. They edited me out of a family portrait and committed inheritance fraud, but let's blame my tone. My sister looked genuinely confused, like the world she knew had just been upended. She snapped that the house paid for her tuition, and I agreed, adding the car, the trip to Mexico, and probably a few handbags along the way. She said it wasn't fair, that I didn't need it, that I was always the independent one who never asked for help. But I reminded her that I didn't ask because I was told there was nothing to ask for. They made sure of that. My mom shifted her tone, trying to soften the situation, saying they didn't think I'd want the responsibility, that I was always so far away and busy. But I was far away because they made it clear I wasn't welcome. I remember that day vividly. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I had just reclaimed ownership of the house, the one my parents had taken from me, and the tension in the air was palpable. I watched as my dad pushed back his chair, trying to maintain control, but I could see the strain in his eyes. I told him he needed a lawyer, and for a moment he froze. I wasn't planning to sue, at least not yet, but I had taken back what was rightfully mine. The tenants had been informed, and the rent payments would now go directly to me. Their access to the house was revoked. My mom looked like she might burst into tears, and I could feel a twinge of guilt, but then she said it. The house was their income, and they depended on it. I tilted my head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Maybe they shouldn't have stolen it from me in the first place. She tried to appeal to our family bonds, but I couldn't see them as family anymore. They were just people I used to be related to. My sister stood there, arms crossed, trying to challenge me. Did I think I was better than them now? No, I told her, just not beneath them anymore. The silence that followed was heavy, like a weight pressing down on us. No one moved, no one even breathed. My dad stared at the envelope in front of him as if it might explode. My mom's face was slack, devoid of any emotion, and my sister looked lost, as if she couldn't grasp that the focus was no longer on her. I picked up my coat, ready to leave. My mom stood up, desperately trying to salvage the situation. Couldn't we talk about this? But we'd already talked for years without me. Every decision they made, every time they left me out, it was like they were telling me I'd understand someday. My dad's jaw was tight as he spoke. If I left now, I shouldn't bother coming back. I paused at the door, taking one last look at them. For the first time, I felt like we agreed on something, and then I left. The cold air hit me as I stepped outside, sharp and clean. It was a reminder that I was still here, still standing, still real. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away. I didn't cry, I didn't smile, I just breathed, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Sometimes the loudest scream is just walking away. It took 3 weeks before I got the first message. It was from my mom, short and polite, as if she'd rewritten it multiple times and still wasn't sure how it would be received. She wanted to talk, said there'd been a misunderstanding, but I didn't reply. A couple of days later, another message came. She didn't want this one thing to ruin everything. My sister was upset, and Dad was trying to keep calm even though he felt blindsided. Blindsided, not when he committed fraud, not when he lied for years, but now. I said nothing. Then a voicemail from my dad appeared. I didn't listen to it. I just stared at the notification before deleting it. The last time he called me kiddo was when I had offered to help with his retirement account, and he'd dismissed me, saying money matters were for those who understood it. Like him. Then came an email from my sister. Did I think I was the winner now? Fine, take the house, but don't come crying when I realized money couldn't buy family. Followed by another message, saying Mom and Dad were stressed, talking about selling the condo. Was that what I wanted? Congratulations. I read that one twice, not out of guilt, but to truly comprehend just how much my reclaiming the property was affecting their finances. The house had been their financial backbone, covering their mortgage, vacations, part of my sister's education, and even some skincare that was more than likely cosmetic work. When I took it back, their whole financial machine sputtered. I hadn't even asked for back rent. Not yet. By spring, whispers started reaching me through mutual acquaintances. A neighbor mentioned my parents were trying to refinance their condo. Someone else said my dad had taken up consulting again, which meant cold calling old clients, hoping for a favor. My mom picked up weekend shifts at a downtown boutique, selling yoga pants to influencers, telling herself it was just temporary. My sister moved back home. The city apartment was too costly, her clients had dried up, and her art collective had imploded. Things were unraveling for them, and I was left to wonder how it had come to this. They had built so much on something that wasn't theirs, and now it was all falling apart. It all started when I decided to let go of the things that held me back. You know, the stuff you keep around because it feels familiar, even if it never really felt like yours. I remember the day I launched that GoFundMe, hoping to kick off a new chapter with a fresh creative project. It was a bit of a laugh, really. I raised a grand total of $83. 2 of those dollars came from my ex-boyfriend, which I found oddly hilarious. Maybe it was just the absurdity of it all. But while that was happening, I was busy fixing up my house. It was my house now, and at first it was dusty and a bit neglected, but it was solid. I hired a contractor to touch up the paint and replace the old windows. Cleared out the furniture my parents had left there, donated most of it. I kept just one piece, a navy blue armchair that sparked a vague memory from my childhood. It was the only thing that felt like it didn't come with strings attached. The tenants I inherited were kind. One of them left me a thank you note after I lowered their rent by $50, saying I was the first landlord who treated them like a human being. That meant more to me than any recycled apologies from my parents ever could. As I settled into the silence of my new life, I began to notice things I hadn't before. The silence, once heavy and personal, became a space for me to stretch into, like finally having room to breathe. I stopped checking my phone every hour, waiting for the next guilt-laden message. I began to sleep through the night. Then, one afternoon, I found a letter in my mailbox. Not a text, not an email, but a real letter addressed in my mom's handwriting. I held it for a while before opening it, not expecting anything genuine but wanting to mark the moment. The envelope carried the scent of her perfume. Inside were 2 neatly written pages filled with lines like, "We didn't know. It wasn't on purpose. We just wanted what was best for everyone." My favorite line was, "You've always been so strong. We didn't realize you ever needed us." It's what people say when your silence has served them well, and they're looking for a reason they never asked why you pulled away. She ended with, "We hope one day you'll come home. Maybe we can start again. Maybe we can be a family." No mention of paying anything back, no acknowledgement of the stolen money, the deceit, or the fact that I'd been cut out of the family portrait like an ex no one wants to talk about. I slipped the letter into a drawer, didn't respond, didn't throw it out either. That was the last time she reached out to me directly. 3 years later, I crossed paths with an old neighbor at a bookstore. She asked if I was still managing the property. I smiled and said I was. She paused briefly and then mentioned she'd heard my parents went through a tough time. I didn't say anything. She gave a small nod and said, "Well, you look happy. That's good." And I was. I still live in the house. Not because I have to or to prove anything, but because it brings me peace. It's mine. I wake up to birdsong and soft sunlight instead of creaky footsteps in the hallway and snide comments about how I never call. I've rebuilt the garden out back, repainted the front steps. The windowsills are lined with plants, the kind that thrive on light and not much else. There's a photo on my mantle now. It's me standing in front of the house, holding the keys. No one else in the frame, just me. It's my favorite picture because no one had to be cut out of it. I still hear from them occasionally. A forwarded message, a note through a cousin, a Christmas card that simply says, "Thinking of you, hope you're doing well." There's no return address. I never write back. And strangely, I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting for justice or closure or even an apology, because I already have what they never managed to give me. My name printed on something permanent, a place to belong, a life that's mine. There was a time when I believed that if I just worked hard enough, if I just earned it, maybe they'd love me like they loved her. But real love, the kind that counts, isn't something you have to earn. It's given freely. What they offered was conditional. What I gave myself was everything they didn't. So, no, I don't miss them. I don't rehearse old conversations. I don't fantasize about emotional reunions or flawless apologies that rewrite the past, because I already rewrote it. The life I have now didn't come with approval or pretty packaging. It came from doing the hardest thing, walking away. And that, it turns out, was the only gift I ever truly needed.